For over 6 centuries, just one single dynasty ruled one of the most powerful empires the world has ever seen. We're talking about an empire that bridged the medieval and modern worlds, and believe me, its influence is still felt today. This is the incredible story of the Ottoman Empire. 600 years. Let that sink in for a second. To put that into perspective, this empire was around to see knights and castles literally transform into the age of steam trains and airplanes. That's just an almost unimaginable length of time for one power to last, right? And it wasn't just about how long they lasted. Their reach, just as impressive. At its absolute peak, the Ottoman Empire wasn't some regional player. No. It was a global force, with territory stretching across the crossroads of Europe, Asia, and Africa. So the big question is, how did this empire even get started? What made it so incredibly powerful? And, of course, what led to its eventual fall? Well, from their grand mosques to their elite warriors, we're going to break it all down. Every great empire has an origin story, but the Ottomans it's pretty remarkable. It didn't kick off with some grand, established civilization. Not at all. It started with a small group of nomadic tribes in a place called Anatolia. So it all kicks off around the year 1299. The main character here is a leader named Osman I. He's the one who manages to unite a bunch of Turkish tribes in Anatolia, which, is modern-day Turkey. And from this one tiny foothold, they started an expansion that would, quite literally, change the world. And we're not talking about some slow, gradual expansion here. Oh, no. This was explosive. It kicked off an entire age of legendary conquerors who took this small regional state and forged it into a true world power. But seriously, how do you do that? How do you make that leap? What does it actually take to go from being a regional player to a global superpower, practically overnight? Well, the answer is you do the impossible. For the Ottomans, the impossible meant conquering a city that had stood for over 1,000 years. A fortress that everyone, and I mean everyone, believed was completely impenetrable. This was the moment. In 1453, a sultan who was only 21 years old, Mehmed II, he used these enormous cannons, which was brand new tech at the time, to just blast through the walls of Constantinople. And when that legendary Byzantine capital fell, it sent shockwaves all the way from Europe to Asia. And the change was immediate, just like that. Constantinople gets a new name, Istanbul, and it becomes the magnificent new capital, the absolute heart, both strategic and cultural, of this booming Ottoman Empire. The impact here was absolutely seismic. Think about it. Before 1453, the Ottomans were a rising power, sure, but a regional one. After 1453, they were a dominant world empire that absolutely no one could ignore. This one victory really did change everything. And that massive win totally set the stage for the empire's golden age, which happened under Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent. Now, this guy, he expanded the empire's borders to their absolute limit. But his legacy wasn't just about conquest. He was also a brilliant administrator. He created a whole new legal code and kicked off an era of just incredible art and architecture. But of course, all this expansion, all this control, it all depended on one thing: military might. And the Ottomans, well, they had a secret weapon, one of the most formidable and frankly unique fighting forces in all of history. They were called the Janissaries. These guys were an elite infantry unit. Basically, they were the Sultan's personal bodyguards and the very tip of the spear in any Ottoman battle. So what made them so darn effective? It all came down to one word: loyalty. Here's how it worked. They were actually recruited as children from conquered Christian lands. They were raised in the palace, converted to Islam, and because they had no family ties, no old allegiances, their loyalty was to the Sultan and the Sultan alone. The result? A super disciplined, ruthlessly effective elite force. But you know how the saying goes, what goes up must come down. No empire lasts forever, and after centuries of just complete dominance, the Ottomans entered a period of slow, gradual decline. A long sunset, you could call it. By the time we get to the 19th century, the other European powers started talking about the empire in a totally different way. It wasn't really a threat anymore. It was an opportunity. They came up with this nickname for it, the sick man of Europe. And that was a pretty clear sign that its huge territories were now seen as vulnerable. So what happened? What caused this decline? Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was more like a perfect storm. You had corruption and nasty power struggles inside the palace. You had a string of pretty ineffective sultans. Then you had these new industrialized European rivals challenging them. And on top of all that, you have revolts popping up all over their massive territories. The once mighty empire was basically just cracking under its own weight. The final nail in the coffin? That came after the devastation of World War I. In 1922, after 600 years, the Ottoman Empire was officially over, dissolved. But here's the thing. The end of the empire wasn't the end of its story, not by a long shot. For those 6 centuries, the Ottomans had fundamentally shaped the culture, the politics, and even the very borders of our modern world. And that legacy, it isn't just trapped in some dusty history books. You can still see it today in the incredible mosques of Istanbul. You can trace its influence in the super complex politics of the Middle East and the Balkans. You could even taste it in the coffee and the food from all the regions it once ruled. Ultimately, the Ottoman story is this powerful reminder that even the mightiest empires eventually fall, but their legacy, for better or for worse, is literally written in stone across 3 continents. And it kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? What will our legacy be?